great pleasure to introduce Dr. Frank Hulstaert, who is a senior researcher at the KCE. He initially studied medicine, but also informatics, and he worked in the clinic and in industry before joining the KCE in 2014. His main areas of expertise are clinical development and technology assessment, covering diagnostics, devices, and medicines. After publishing the report last year, he now leads the KCE Trials program, which he'll give you an update of now.
Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. It's a great pleasure to see you with so many in the room for this first KCE Trials Symposium. And actually, this is a joint effort. We are a small team, the KCE Trials team, but I want to introduce, well, you have seen Jilly on the podium. We have Hilde Nevens, perhaps you can just... we have Lane is busy with Twitter in the back, or there she is. And we have France sitting here in the front. So this has been a good year, I would say, since the decision was made to start, and a very active year. Working at KCE for well, more than 12 years now. We've been busy mainly with health technology assessment, and as you've heard, besides the desktop work that we classically do for health technology assessment, there's also the primary research, and that's what we will talk about. First of all, the need for independent trials, because, and that was studied in this report that came out last year, there are important research questions that are of interest to society that will never be answered by industry trials alone, because there is no commercial interest. For example, pragmatic comparative effectiveness trials, and then trials in areas that are not owned by industry, such as surgery, lifestyle interventions, diet, psychotherapy, and so forth. But also areas that are still underserved in terms of trials, such as pediatrics, despite all the regulatory efforts, and orphan diseases. Medical devices is a field where we've also been active in for a while, where well, there's some improvement coming, but still many medical devices come to the market without a lot of clinical evidence. And then there is the field, of course, of the repurposing of older drugs, as has been mentioned, including very early clinical development, but this is out of scope of the KCE trials. We really focus on the more comparative effectiveness type of trials. And we put our hat on of the healthcare payers, where the aim is to maximize the health within the available budget. And as mentioned, we used to do the desktop research alone, and often we had to conclude that there is no answer because the level of evidence is so low, there is just no comparative trials available. And then, of course, we find that selecting and funding clinical trials should be part of the research and development efforts of healthcare payers. And of course, those trials should answer then the questions that are of relevance for the payers. And what is of interest for the healthcare payers? They're mainly interested in trials that study a broad patient population, the ones that will be seen in real life, and as a comparator, not an active comparator, but the best available alternative. And the endpoints should be of relevance for the patients, should be quality of life and survival, for example. And this tension between the typical placebo-controlled trial and the more pragmatic practice-oriented trial is also a tension that was felt when we participated to the early dialogues with industry moving to phase 3, where the HTA bodies really insisted to more go to the pragmatic, practice-oriented trial and use the best available alternative as a comparator. So this was summarized in a report mentioned before, published in June last year, and now also there is a manuscript available which you can find the reprint in the break at the desks. And one of the conclusions was that in addition to patient benefit, publicly funded trials can provide a positive return on the investment. So also for healthcare payers, this is an important message, of course. As mentioned in October last year, the decision was made that KCE could set up a program of practice-oriented clinical trials, and we called it KCE Trials, with a budget this year and next year of 5 million euros a year, and then from 2018 onwards of 10 million euros a year. And in the note, it was mentioned a return on the investment is expected. And the challenge we put ourselves for this year was to have a first patient in a trial, and it looks like we are well underway for that, as we signed a first contract for Belgian participation to a zone and weight trial, the VINCA trial. So what are the ambitions? We want our trials to be immediately useful to patients and clinical practice, but also to policy and decision makers. As at NIHR, the HTA program, we see as an extension, in fact, of our desktop HTA program. We go for national trials and international trials. Belgium is a small country, so often we will not find the number of patients needed in Belgium alone. We will be the funder of the trials, and we look for non-commercial sponsors to conduct the trial. And indeed, sponsor, Tom, is the more regulatory term, and for non-drug trials, we also use the term sponsor, although lead center could be a better word. And we have identified the need for clinical trial units in Belgium, and we'll come back to that. The key success factors identified in our report for publicly funded trials was first, a good selection, do your homework, then a professional conduct of the trial, and then to implement the results. It's not good enough to publish the results in the New England Journal. It's to implement it in clinical practice that counts. And how did we implement that in our program? Actually, we did a copy-paste a lot from what NIHR was doing. So we also developed panels where the research question was defined with the help of a lot of clinicians and other healthcare workers and patient organizations. Then the trials board is more dealing with the value for money and the scientific rigor of the protocols that are being developed. And the final prioritization is done by what we call the prioritization group, which is delegated by our KCE board, and our KCE board takes the final funding decisions. And then the clinical trial unit is there to help with the professional conduct of the trial, and you will hear a lot today about clinical trial units and how they are best organized. A last point, I think the composition of our KCE board is important when it comes to implement the results, because we have all the important Belgian stakeholders present in our KCE board, including the reimbursement agency. And if you are a patient representative or a healthcare worker and you would like to contribute to this program and join one of our panels for specific disease domains, please let us know. Sponsor capacity, clinical trial units. In industry, this is a dedicated department with affiliates in all the countries. In hospitals, large hospitals, there is also a clinical trial unit, but for the moment in Belgium, they mainly deal with legal issues, the contracts, the budgets, and the ethics review. But such units are also needed for dealing with data management, statistics, monitoring of the trial, vigilance, safety reporting. And typically, these activities were, I learned, out of scope of the hospital accreditation exercises that went on. KCE organized two-day visits to all 7 university hospitals. I don't know whether Leen van Herle is in the room. She is there. So she was leading this exercise together with someone from KCE. Hilde or someone else joined at these visits to the university hospitals that took place over summer period. And not only the clinical trial unit was visited, but also the different departments that were conducting clinical trials. And this was conducted in a win-win atmosphere because, of course, we as KCE, when we want to fund, we need high quality, and so we do need such clinical trial units. And also the hospitals could win in getting more trials ongoing in their hospital. This is been anonymized, and it's not important to look what hospital you belong to, but it's more an indication that you see still a lot of red where actions is needed. For example, for quality management systems and vigilance processes, for example, but also it includes like having an overview of the recruitment centrally or the data management processes. In fact, hospitals, university hospitals, are not used to do a lot of large multi-center randomized trials as a sponsor. There's a few, and the expertise is actually scattered. It is in the departments, and the expertise is not shared. There is no central management of the trials, of the procedures, the quality management, the recruitment, the vigilance, the vendors, etc. Also in terms of trial data management, we see that there is electronic case report form expertise available, but it is in the departments and the expertise is not shared. The same is true for data management. Sometimes it's still in a spreadsheet and not in a database with, where changes can be tracked. And we will support the clinical trial units with IT tools and with training. Where are we today? We got 165 topic suggestions in. 11 clinical questions were put on our website and advertised. And it goes from more GP topics to very high-cost specialized care. And the review process is ongoing for the moment. We have also 3 trials funded by ZonMW, and for one of these, the participation of Belgian sites, the contracts were signed for the funding. So that's where we are today. I will briefly go through a couple of questions that are frequently asked on this program. So we think that in some cases, pragmatic trials can be most informative for payers. We work with non-commercial sponsors for regulatory exemptions reasons, but perhaps also VAT exemptions, we will see. Industry involvement is fine to supply free product as long as no strings are attached. Why multi-center trials only? We really want to stimulate collaboration between the centers, and it will speed the recruitment, and it will provide support for implementation. International trials, again, when the patients are not available here, and in terms of speed of recruitment, this will help. Co-funding may be needed on a case-by-case basis to be seen. Why we go for strict data management and data access? Because we want those trials to be a solid basis for decision-making. Why do we want in the budget a lot of detail on all activities? Because that way we can compare the different offers we receive, and so it's fair. And it's also a reassurance that all these activities are planned. And a term I copied from Sarah, the microscopic monitoring will be conducted once the trial is ongoing, and it will allow for that. And why involve patients from the start? Well, their input, as you've heard, is very important on the acceptance of the trial, the feasibility, and the endpoints. So what is next? Next year, we will have the investigator-led work stream, again, with a focus on the return on the investment in addition to patient benefit. The announcement will come in the first quarter next year, and if you have any questions, please contact us. We are there to help you. Thank you. Questions?
Could you explain why drug repurposing is out of scope? Because in the surrounding countries, like Zone has it in scope and also MHRA.
We hope to grow over the years and also have the development part as part of our funding program, but we had to start somewhere, and so we started with the comparative effect. We think that the low-hanging fruits are there in terms of quick return on the investment.
Question Oman from ECRI. What are your models for co-funding of international trials? You mentioned a bilateral cooperation with the Netherlands. There may be other options. Experts are discussing Garanets in the European Commission. So what is the idea about co-funding in international trials?
Well, the co-funding we now have with the Zone trials is not the ideal situation. It was a trial already ongoing in the Netherlands, and they tried to expand it, and then the Belgian investigators were interested to participate, and we provide the funding for that. That's one approach. A more ideal approach I see as the NIHR Australia collaboration, where they have a common call where investigators from both countries can apply for the same call. But of course it takes, and actually we had a preparation meeting on that yesterday afternoon. It takes a lot of collaboration between the countries involved to get there, and also the funding organizations and the synchronization of the calls. And it's not easy to do. So the ERANET, when also the European Commission will be on board, and we will hear this afternoon, that is another alternative of getting there. But still, international comparison, as you know very well in ECRIN, is still a challenge, and is not easy to overcome.
Yeah.
Off-label use would also be a very interesting area. For diseases with a very low prevalence, we use medications very often off-label, and evidence is mostly quite low.
I think all the pediatric trials that are now on the list, they are all off-label, because that's the standard in pediatrics, probably.
So, Frank, when discussing this type of international cooperation, an issue which is often raised is, does Belgian money go to research on foreign patients? Is that an issue which is of importance also here, and certainly for the politicians?
It should be possible that Belgian money goes to foreign patients, but within limits, and it all depends on the value for money that is in there. And we had the discussion yesterday, and it should be possible, but on a case-by-case basis, it needs to be seen.
Okay. Small question on clinical trial units. As you correctly mentioned, clinical trial units in Belgium are quite fragmented, and they don't cooperate that much with each other, even within a single region. Clinical trial units. Will there be every kind of legal framework kind of forcing them to collaborate if they don't want to collaborate? Because just asking them you have to collaborate, it's always a bit...
Up to now, we have a few examples, and this is very positive. Also, the clinical trial units from university hospitals working together and split the work. So the movement so far, so good. And a lot of activity ongoing. And that, I think the people in the room are an illustration of this enthusiasm that there is in the hospitals for the moment. We need to keep it going, of course.